Welcome. I'd like to welcome everyone this morning to our webinar. We have a great speaker this morning. We are welcoming Marc Bolick with the Design Thinkers Group based out of Greenville, South Carolina. And today we are discussing what his firm title suggests, design thinking. Before we begin, I'd like to go over two housekeeping items. First of all, if you can hear me, this is the test. Please raise your hand in the webinar controls. Let's see. All right, Jeremy, Joseph, welcome. Michael, Kirk. Great crowd today. People are still funneling in. Come on in. The weather's warm over here, so there you go. Thank you. All right, glad everybody can hear us. All right, secondly, we're going to keep all of the audience audio muted the entire time. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the webinar controls. And we're going to actually pause halfway through, and I will ask Marc the questions that are in the webinar controls, and then he will answer them. We also have a couple polls going that we will open up throughout the webinar, so keep an eye out for those. And then that'll be our Q&A kind of session in the middle, and then in the end. My name is Julia Linton, and I serve as the operations manager for the SC Launch team. Please join me in welcoming Marc. He has over 20 years of experience in product design services. Marc has worked for clients in a variety of sectors, all of which you all are in those sectors. Financial services, web and mobile applications, medical devices, international development, consumer goods. He is a very engaging and entertaining speaker. He has a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. He has an MBA. He has a master's in business informatics. I mean, we're in for a treat today, guys. So Marc, welcome. We are here talking about such a relevant and hot topic, but what I want to know is if we build it, will they come? Marc, welcome.
Thank you, Julia. That's awesome introduction. I appreciate it. About the entertaining part, I'm not going to do any singing or anything today, but hopefully I'll be able to give you guys an overview of what design thinking is. And as an entrepreneur myself, I've been outside of the corporate world for the better part of 20 years, and I've been involved in a bunch of different types of startups, and currently I'm running my own company, Design Thinkers Group here in the US. I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a second, but I was excited to be invited to speak to everybody to share a little bit about what I've learned about this thing called design thinking and how it might help entrepreneurs like yourselves and the people that you support. If that's what if you're a support organization or a student. So yeah, the title is if I build it, will they come? And hopefully you'll understand what that means at the end of this presentation. Very quickly, I want to just kind of give you an overview of what's coming. I'll do a quick introduction myself and my organization. I'm going to do an overview of what design thinking is, assuming that some of you know and some of you don't. We'll find out here in just a second. And then I want to sort of focus what I think is interesting, the three main points that are takeaways for you as entrepreneurs, or really anyone that are I would say the main differentiating things between design thinking and other problem-solving methodologies. As we go along, I'm going to introduce some case stories and also provide you with a preview of some tools and tips that I'm going to send along after this webinar through Julia to you as a sort of starter kit if you want to try out some of the things that I'll be talking about. As Julia mentioned, we'll be stopping every once in a while for Q&A. At the midpoint of the presentation, after I talk about what design thinking is, we'll pause for some questions, and then at the end of the presentation, in the second half, we'll also pause for some questions. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions and seeing. I'm here to help you guys hopefully understand what design thinking is and get a feel for it, and perhaps if I do my job, encourage you to give it a try. So what I'd like to start with, there goes my computer glitchy. One second. So Julia, if you could launch that first poll, and this is just, if you guys could just take a minute to answer this one. Well, we actually have two questions. The first one is, who are you? If you take a second to just answer that question.
All right, I'm not sure if everybody can see.
Yeah, I'm seeing the poll, so I think.
Oh, you are. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, but are you seeing the answers come in? All right, looks like we are pretty even. Entrepreneurs or supporting entrepreneurs, a couple of corporate answers or not-for-profit employees.
Okay.
Let's see. All right.
You got most responses?
Looks like there we are. They've officially slowed down. 75% of the people have voted, and we are at about 20% entrepreneur, 20% supporting entrepreneur, definitely closer to 30% with the academic answer, and then right about 20% with corporate, not-for-profit. There you go.
Yeah, great. Cool. So let's launch that second poll. And this question is about what types of methodologies do you use in your design work and how you create products for your customers, products and services. So lean startup, design thinking, jobs to be done, stage gate. There are others. I would say that design sprints are either part of lean startup or design thinking. That's kind of up to you. Just trying to get a feel for where people land.
All right, we're at about 50% now. The majority of people are saying lean startup and design thinking. 20% though are also saying none of the above. No one yet has mentioned stage gating. Either they're not familiar with the term or that's not a relevant structure.
Could very well be, yeah.
All right, we're at about 75% of people have voted, and the tie is lean startup and design thinking.
Awesome, awesome, great, great. So that gives me a good feel of who the audience is and where you guys, where your expertise is. Given that many of you know lean startup and design thinking, I think you'll recognize a lot of what I'm going to be talking about when I talk about what design thinking is. It is one of those things that people have different sort of definitions of what design thinking is. So I'm going to kind of present to you guys what we think design thinking is. But first, let me just tell you a little bit about our company. We're Design Thinkers Group. When I started here in the US, I joined a colleague of mine, my former partner, who was an architect, and in 2012, at the end of the recession, he had gotten into design thinking because he was trying to find how he could use his design skills when people weren't designing buildings, and he came into this world of design thinking, met our founders in the Netherlands, and back in 2012, there were 5 organizations or 5 teams around the world, and now we're in more than 20 countries. They're all small teams, all independent. It looks like a big corporation, which gives us a lot of reach, and we staff across the world on projects. But we're still very, very entrepreneurial, small team here in the US of 10 people. We do 2 things. We help organizations solve complex challenges using the methodology of human-centered design, and then we also build design thinking capabilities inside of organizations. We do that through the Design Thinkers Academy brand. You can see that brand behind me. We also have a website if you're interested in learning more. designthinkersacademy.com/USA is where you can see the courses that we have offered. We have a few coming up here in the fall. Of course, this is our NASCAR, as we call it, with all the brands, some of the brands that we've worked with, but that's about us. So I want to talk about what design thinking is. And as I said, it's kind of one of those things that's really defined in people's heads. I think there's some commonalities. I'm going to touch on some of those. But before I get started, I always like to show this picture. And if you just look at it for a second, you go, well, what is that? And some of you will go, yeah, I see that guy in the middle with his arms spread out. This must be some kind of airport security. And I want to contrast that between this version of airport security to what we are normally used to seeing, which is, this is Denver Airport. That previous picture was Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. And the difference of the experience for the humans is, I would kind of jokingly say, it's kind of like these chickens being processed. That's kind of how you feel in the Denver airport versus in the Amsterdam airport, where the experience is much more pleasant and it's much more designed around humans. And the point of that is that great experiences are intentionally designed, and they're designed by humans for humans. And that's one of the things that I think is really strong about design thinking, and I think many entrepreneurs are doing this anyway instinctively. And I love this quote by Maya Angelou, that I've learned that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And feelings are not something that we typically get taught in engineering school or business school or school in general. And one of the things that I think is the big differentiating factor of design thinking is that you have to get into that messy world of people's feelings and this thing called empathy, which I'll talk about in just a second. So design thinking is really a way of understanding your customers, and it's a way to get your teams and to get yourself into a creative space. One of the easiest ways to understand it is this Venn diagram that is in a book called Change by Design, which is by Tim Brown, and it's a sort of a seminal book in design thinking. Very easy to read. You can read it in a weekend. Change by Design by Tim Brown, and it talks about this idea that if you want to have innovation, if you want to come up with some great ideas and great experiences for your customers, you have to be at the intersection of desirability, feasibility, and viability. The feasibility is all about, can we do it? So is it something that's technically or operationally feasible? The viability is about, should we do it? And so that's, can you make money with it? Is it financially sustainable? And then finally, the desirability is about really, what do people need? What do they want? Where are their latent unmet needs? And as an engineer, I worked in the feasibility part of things, and then as a business person and as an entrepreneur, a lot of the times thinking about, hey, can we make money on this? If not, we're not really interested. And if many people start solving problems from those, or they start businesses from the feasibility or the viability. And so design thinking, one of the main differentiating factors is you start first by trying to understand people's needs. And that's counterintuitive. And that's in fact why it's called design thinking. And it's because designers as a whole have a sort of a different methodology. The study of design thinking started in the late 60s, early 70s, when they were looking at creative problem solving, and they realized that designers have a slightly different approach, or perhaps a radically different approach, than other types of problem solving methodologies, such as the scientific method or the way that engineers and technologists solve problems. But their brains aren't really different. So everybody can learn this. And one of the things that really differentiates designers is that they're comfortable with a stage of messiness and ambiguity. And they're really not looking to solve a problem and jumping towards solutions. They're really looking to find things that they don't know. And that is one of the key parts of what I think differentiates design thinking from other methodologies. There are, in our definition of, or the way that we look at design thinking, it's really about three things. It's about a methodology, so I'll talk about that. And I'm going to talk about each one of these individually, but it's a flexible methodology. It's also about a set of tools and activities that are all about structuring conversations between the people that are involved in designing the products and services that you're working on. But most importantly, it's about the mindset, and it's the mindset of being really focused and centered on the people that you're designing for and designing with, and we'll talk about that in a second. So quickly, the methodology. When I started design thinking, I started as an engineer, a good engineer, looking, sort of studying and researching the what design thinking was. Had to kind of come up with an idea of what it meant to me, so I could be able to tell other people what it was. And if you Google image search design thinking, you'll come up with literally hundreds of different visualizations of what the process is, of what the methodology is. And what we kind of have landed on is a sort of a mashup between two particular frameworks. One is the Stanford D School's 5 hexagons, and so it's empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And that's a visualization to help explain kind of where you are in the process. And then the other one that we really like is the Double Diamond. It's called the Double Diamond by the UK Design Council. And it talks about creating choices, making choices, and 3 stages of explore, design, and implement. Yeah. The visualization of the Double Diamond is particularly interesting. If you kind of look at the whole process, there's half of the process you're looking for the problem, your problem finding, and the other half of the process, just schematically, is about problem solving. We had mashed those two up, and you can see the two here. You see the diamond shape. You also see the 5 stages plus a plan stage, and we like to have the symmetry of 6 stages. Planning being very important when you kick off a project. Also using human-centered design to kick off the project is really important. And the thing that people always push back on this particular model is that it looks like it's a linear process that goes step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, et cetera, et cetera. And it is to some degree, but we like to think of it more as a sort of a roadmap to tell you where you are in the process, as opposed to being going from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, et cetera, et cetera. And so we represent that by showing that there are loops that go back and forth between these stages. And I'll kind of talk to you a little bit about that later, but you'll see that if you get to a point where you've got a great idea and you take it out and you prototype it, it may turn out that you get feedback from people that says, hey, I really like this part, but this doesn't make any sense to me, or they tell you something that's new, and then you need to go back and loop back to, say, the planning or the research stage. Now, design thinking, this is sort of all good and well. It's sort of theoretical, but in practice, it feels like this. And this sketches what we call the squiggly line. It's very uncomfortable for some people, especially at the beginning in that period of ambiguity where you're trying to find the problem. Many people are just, look, I know what the problem is. We just need to solve it. This is what it is. And that's perfectly fine. But the weakness of that is that you don't find things that you don't already know. You're not out speaking to customers and trying to find their needs. So one of the big problems with this process is that humans are natural problem solvers. We have evolved to be really, really good at just solving problems, and we do that even unconsciously often. So this is part of the sort of pattern that we have to break when we're working as design thinkers, is to try to take I think of it now as a sort of a mental switch that I'm flipping off. I got to stop my problem solving. I'm going to go into the mode of problem finding. So it's a kind of a hard reflex to resist, but being aware of it is half of the solution. Design thinking, as I mentioned, the second part of it is tools and activities. And as I mentioned, tools and activities to structure conversations. And that's often something that people just come together in a meeting. They say they want to brainstorm on things, or they want to look at different ideas, or they want to define the problem. All of those end up being people around a table, or nowadays people on Zoom, just having a conversation. But having structure to those conversations is really important. In the design thinking process, we have a whole bunch of tools. I won't go into all of those. We'll talk about a few of those in this talk. But in each stage, there are various different tools and structured methods that you can use to do the empathize part, to do the research, the reframing, the ideating, and prototyping, et cetera. When we do this in the past, before COVID, a lot of what we did was in person. Yeah, we worked in workshop environments, and we used lots and lots of Post-it notes, but you see these big, large format printouts of, these are the things we call tools that we give instruction on how to use those tools, and then small teams of people gather around and provide their inputs and then share information and have these structured conversations. Here's an example of a journey map, which is a really powerful tool. I believe this was for a Coca-Cola project that we did. And you know, you can see that they're breaking down things into granular bits and having these deep conversations and looking deeply into the lived experience, in this case, of a persona named Sarah. In the virtual world nowadays, we do all of this in virtual whiteboards. We use the tool called Mural. There's also Miro and many others. You can also just use something like PowerPoint in a shared cloud environment, or even better, maybe Google Slides, which is super easy and free, allows you to do these kinds of things. And they look like this. They have virtual Post-it notes, but it looks very similar and it works the same. And it's actually quite efficient. So that's a super interesting transition that we've gone through. Finally, the most important part of design thinking is the mindset. I'll break that down into a couple of core principles. First and foremost is empathy. And again, this is one of those things that I don't think that they really teach people in school. You hear a lot about it these days. You know, it's the idea of being able to see the world through the eyes of somebody else, or being able to feel like you're getting into their heads. Empathy, you can't really actually see the world from another person's perspective. But if you make the effort, that's when you find interesting things. And so a core part of design thinking is really making a concerted effort and using processes and these tools and this structured way of trying to really open up a view of what the people that you're designing for, what their lived experience is. One of the other key things is it's very collaborative, and it's collaborative not only within your organization, but it should be collaborative with your partners, the other people that are in your value chain, and in particular with your customers. And there's this thing called co-creation, and it's quite a lot of our clients are working in a co-creative way where they bring in their customers into a process, and I'll show an example of that here shortly, to basically design with their customers. It requires you to be a little bit vulnerable, but it's an extremely powerful way of going about it. So we talk about design thinking as being about empathy, but also it's about diversity of thinking and getting the right players and the right people involved in the design process. So collaborative. The other part is extremely iterative, and you know, we've maybe all heard of this idea that Thomas Edison had 10,000 designs of a light bulb before he actually got the one that worked, the filament that was just right. And that's all about the idea that you have a hypothesis in your mind about something that's going to work, and maybe even the materials about how it's going to work, or the particular code that's going to, or the UI that's going to be pleasing to the user. But it's not until you actually put it in front of the people that you're designing for and get their feedback that you know whether it's worked. And so the idea is prototyping, this iterative process. Pretty much everything in design thinking is iterative. And that's very counter to some of the instincts of entrepreneurs who may have spent their entire career up to this point knowing something deeply, working in an area very deeply, and being convinced that they have the answer. And this idea of being vulnerable and open to the idea that your what you have in your head is really only a hypothesis until you've tested it. That fail fast, fail often is a really important part of design thinking. And I've mentioned the idea of prototyping, and we talk about, so excuse the language, but shitty first drafts. And this is not just us being vulgar, it is a thing. It goes back to the world of literature, where in order to get a out of the writer's block, writers often had to, well, they talk about this idea that you have to have a first draft, and it's gonna be crappy. And it's only from the first draft that the second draft gets better, and then the third draft gets better, and then finally you have something that's just right. Anybody who's written knows what that's all about. But even in the world of ideas, building a shitty first draft of your idea is super, super important, and perhaps that will stay with you. Two last things. One is that it's action oriented, and I think this is talking all about getting out of the building, not sitting in your isolated environment, getting out, working differently, collaborating with other people in a different way, because that's the only way that you're going to find new solutions, if you work and collaborate differently with other people. And finally, and not least importantly, design thinking can be very fast. And you see this image of a child with a slingshot. We talk about this slingshot metaphor a lot. In order to get a big bang, you have to pull the slingshot back quite a bit. If you pull the slingshot just a little bit back, you're going to get a little bang. And the idea there is that you need to spend the upfront time finding the right problem to solve before you go to the problem solving. So you go slow at the beginning to go faster at the end. And this is something this is one of the primary reasons that businesses all over the world are using design thinking, because it's actually saves you time in the market, as we all know, is money. So it also saves you money. So in summary, human-centered, collaborative, empathetic, iterative, action-oriented, and fast. So those are the key points about what design thinking are. Remember these three parts: a methodology, tools and activities, and a mindset. I may have failed to mention that the methodology is something that's flexible. So you need to find which of those representations. We happen to use the double diamond with the 6 steps, but you need to make it yours. It could be just 3 circles or however you want to do it. That's kind of pretty much what design thinking is. And I like to think of it this way. Design thinking is putting the tools and the mindset and the way of working that designers have into other people, into non-designers, so that they can come up with vastly greater range of problems to solve, and those problems are essentially business opportunities for you. So that is the first half of my presentation. I'm going to stop and pause and turn it over to Julia. If you guys, yeah, I think you probably already know, but in GoToMeeting, you have the little questions box down there. It may look something like this. This is a screen grab I got off the internet. But if you'd like to submit any questions, we'll take a few minutes to answer some of those questions.
Great, thank you, Mark. All right, we've got the question. I've got the question panel open, ready to take those questions. While you're, quickly typing in your notes there, I just want to ask a question that I have, and it's: at what point or when should someone say, hey, I need to start design thinking? Is it when they have officially, started their business? Is it when they're a year in? Is it before they start their business? What is your suggestion for when do you get started with design thinking?
I think that's always going to depend on the entrepreneur and the team, and I think it's a really, really good question, because I think if you remember, that's the methodology, the tools, and then the mindset. I think you should get started with the mindset right away. Whenever the mindset of putting people at the center of your problem-solving process. That's something that once you realize the power of that, you should be doing that immediately. And I will admit this all probably for many of you is just, yeah, I know that, right? And we're not here to try to sell anything about design thinking. That is absolutely not the point. But really having the way that you go about making your products and services, serving your customers, the way you go about structuring the way your company works internally, which is full of, well, depending on how big your company is full of internal service providers, right? So HR is an internal service provider to employees and to management. IT is typically an internal service provider, and we've actually done a lot of work internal with companies, obviously bigger companies than startups. But the idea of really putting people at the center of the process, as opposed to, we talk about typically teams are designing from the inside out, from the inside of their organization out, and this is turning it around. It's actually designing the solutions from the outside in. It's really bringing the customer into the design process. So I think right away is the short answer, but it depends on the organization and the people and whether they want to, do this or not.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we've got some great questions that are coming in. We have about 5 or 6 or 7 now questions that have come in. Here we go. I'm just going to start firing away. Really quickly, what is the relationship between design thinking and UX?
That's a great question. The UX is a human-centered, it can be a human-centered design methodology. So UX is user experience design, and you can use design thinking tools and methods to do UX, right? But UX, I guess in my view, is the function of people designing for user experience. And I think that the main difference would be that design thinking tends to look at the holistic experience of your customer or the employee or whoever you're designing for, and it includes services and products, whereas UX is really focused on user interface in applications. So it's a small slice of the overall experience, but it's a very, very important slice of the experience. So it can be combined with design thinking.
Okay, great. Here we go. We're switching it up a bit, just looking to get your ideas for people to get out of the building or buy into the idea. So 2 questions related to what are efficient ways to actually get out of the building? Like, is it just door to door and cold calls? And then also a question about, getting team member buy-in, and how do you, get everybody behind the same goal with this thought?
Yeah, for the first one, I think being brave and just having conversations with your customers and trying to meet them where your product intersects their use of your product or the need that you're trying to meet. The simplest thing is to get a panel of people or get a group of people that you can survey. They could be friends and family. Surveys are really good because they're simple, they're easy, and they're cheap, and they give you initial starting points for more research. I'll talk a little bit about research in just a minute, one of the cases, but then the second thing is to structure some conversations with customers, and that could be meeting them where they are, or that could be bringing them into your team, into your Zoom meeting or whatever, and really interviewing them, but having a structured set of questions that you want to use to try to understand their perspective on things. And then the other question about how do you get your team started if you're the sort of champion, or you want to be the brave soul to bring this into your team. That's so near and dear to my heart, because we deal with that question all the time through our Design Thinkers Academy, and we always say just get started with one activity, right? And there are some really simple tools. I'm going to be sending on sort of a starter kit. One of the easiest ones is stakeholder mapping, and I think I might have an image of that here, but that's just kind of like a structured conversation that you can have that you can run in an hour-long meeting with your team. Another one is empathy mapping, and we're going to send the empathy map on to everybody. And that's a way of like, do we really understand our customers? And that's a team activity. It's the collaborative part of it, getting different people on the team looking at the customer's needs and the customer's lived experience together in a very simple, structured way is a really good place to start. I think I wouldn't recommend that you come in and say, hey guys, we're going to do design thinking and we're going to do it today and we're going to do it from here forward, because that's really you're going to get a lot of pushback on that. So start with a few small tools. Don't necessarily tell people that you're doing design thinking on them or using design thinking. Just do it and test and learn. So that, I think we can come back to more questions, Julia, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was probably that last topic you just talked about. That was an additional 3 or 4 questions. So,
okay.
Yeah, stakeholder and empathy mapping. We'll look forward to hearing more about that, and then we'll come back to the other questions in a little bit. Thanks.
Perfect. So I want to transition into. I was giving this some thought as I was preparing for speaking to entrepreneurs and startups and people supporting them. And so design thinking, a lot of the work that we do, I'll be honest with you, is with large organizations. And it really is a powerful methodology for large organizations because they really need help in many ways to make connections with their customers. Now, as a past entrepreneur and as a current entrepreneur, I mean, I was involved in some startups where were product-related startups. And intuitively, entrepreneurs can be very good at making connections with their customers. So again, acknowledging that, but a couple of things that I think are really important for entrepreneurs that I want to talk to you about. Actually, it's 3 things. So the takeaways for you as entrepreneurs. So remember the double diamond. There are 3 places where I think you should concentrate. One is finding insights. Now, the word insights, something that it needs some definition, but the way I like to look at it is insights is that sort of rush of energy that you get in your head when you see something very clearly now that wasn't clear before. It's some sort of new discovery. And that's where the gold is, right? Is once you understand what your customers really need and want, that is where you can make money, essentially. Those are the areas, those are what we call opportunities for design. So insights could be things that are positive or negative about the experience of the customer, but super, super important. You have to go look for them. It's like hunting for worms when you're going fishing. As a little boy, I remember doing that. So that's number 1. Number 2, choosing a focus for your problem solving, right? So, you know, this term boiling the ocean, right? So you cannot solve everything in your customer's life, right? You have to choose specific areas. And it's through finding those insights that you can find areas that really could add value to your customers. And then you have that value exchange back from the customers to pay you for that value that you're adding for them. So choosing a focus to say, it's the minimum viable product idea of lean startup is figure out where you're going to concentrate your energy in your problem solving and the rest of your process. And then finally, I talked about this thing about prototyping like Thomas Edison does. Find a place. I mean, you have to iterate, not find a place. You have to iterate. Once you get an idea and you have a hypothesis buried in that idea, test your hypotheses, right? Test them at the cheapest possible expense you can. We call those affordable bets. Make some affordable bets. Invest a small amount of money, the minimum amount of money, in order to test your hypothesis. So another way to look at it is we don't know what we don't know. So that's in the whole research phase, and that's super important. Remember, that's problem finding. Half of the process theoretically is trying to find the right problem to solve. Picking a manageable problem to solve, so that reframing step in the middle, and then forming hypotheses and testing those to learn, right? I'm going to talk about examples of each one of those. So finding insights. So this is an example. We did not work on this project, but one of we collaborate with GE Healthcare, and in particular, Doug Dietz is someone I've gotten to know. He's an amazing designer, industrial designer, works at GE Healthcare. I just happen to used to work at the GE Healthcare. We do collaborate with his boss, and his boss kind of tells the story in this way. But I will encourage you to write down the name Doug Dietz and TEDx, right? Like the TED Talks, and Google that when you get a chance. It's 18 minutes, 20-minute long little video of Doug Dietz telling this story. And it's an amazing story, so well worth the watch. But here's the short Cliff's Notes version of it. So Doug he's an industrial designer, and he'd work on this new MRI machine, and all, you know, industrial designers build all the interfaces, the covers on the MRI machine, and all the pretty parts and stuff like that. And he was walking down the hall to see his new machine, and he saw parents with a child coming in the other direction, and the child was scared, and the parents were completely distraught. And he just saw at the end of the hall, one of the parents leaned down and said, "It's going to be okay, honey." And the child was just clinging to her mother's leg, and it was just a terrible experience. And he said, "You know, I failed because that when you go into an MRI machine, the thing that you see is this, right? You see all of these everything that you've been programmed to do as a child is do not go in that door. And unfortunately, you have to go in that door in order to get a scan. And then when you get inside, here's what you see as a child, right? It's this monster, and they're going to put you inside of the monster, right? And it's going to eat you up, and it makes a lot of noise. So it's a really not great experience for the child. And in fact, 80% of children have to be sedated when they're getting different kinds of scans, which is extremely expensive and dangerous, had side effects. So Doug and his team spent quite a bit of time doing research. They brought in people from a children's museum to work with them, and all kinds of processes that they did in researching to understand how can we make this a better experience for patients, to reduce the costs and to make the results better, and so forth and so on. And they came up with this, and you may have heard this story, but it's literally the way his boss, Mark Sisko, talks about it, is like a couple of $100 worth of stickers, and all of a sudden the whole experience is transformed from the patient. They've designed a whole set of scripts to make the patient or the child think that, you know, they're coming into the pirate island, or they're coming into you know, the undersea world, and the little you know, the fish will rotate over your head as you're in the scanner. So they really totally redesigned the experience for children. Now this is, I think all medical device manufacturers for pediatric hospitals are taking up some version of this, but it's just an amazing example, my favorite example of design thinking success. 99% drop in pediatric CT sedation, which is total bottom line impact, and then a 66% increase in the number of patients that they could put through the machine, which is, you know, that's solving the problem for the children, it's solving it for the parents, it's solving it for the hospital, and it's making the life, if you watch that video, much better also for the assistants and the nurses that are working with the patients. It's an amazing story. So I'm going to send you a couple of tools for this phase, this research phase. It's a research, what we call a method card. It looks a little bit like this. I will send you PDF versions of this. So that's kind of what it looks like. I won't go into these tips because we don't have a lot of time. That's documented in this method card. And we'll also send you PDF versions of these tools, and you can print them out as large as you want, or you can just use them, as I said, as a slide and share them on Google Slides or something like that. Second part, choosing a focus. So the story I want to tell here is definitely one of the projects we worked on. It's with SAP, and back in the day, still today, to date, many enterprise software are really not easy to use. And so SAP did a lot of research, and they determined that they really needed to consumerize certain parts of this very complex set of software that they make and they sell to their customers. And they came up with this thing called SAP Fiori. And it's a way of sort of focusing in on very specific tasks, and their design principles were to design new applications like you would have on your phone for one role, so one type of person using it, to do one task and have a maximum of 3 screens that they have to go through to get that task done. So SAP, we collaborated with them to design a workshop to bring in their customers. So they brought in 6 different customer groups with their the partners that do the installation and maintenance of the SAP product. We ran this workshop with those customers. They developed things like personas, like journey maps, storyboards. This is all done over the course of 2 days. And then at the end, we prototyped, we built models of the vision of a particular solution. In this case, it was for a field working crew for PG&E, the California-based electricity company, to be able to replace an employee that gets sick, but do that very quickly using those 3 principles of design. And we mocked it up using PowerPoint. This is all PowerPoint here. And at the end of the 2 days, we had those prototypes, and then in 3 days, the technology people built those prototypes and had it up and running on the Friday. And there was amazing feedback from all the parties that were involved in this. Example, design was totally different than the design we had already started. And then the other quote here is, hey, yeah, we presented it to end users and it was well received. So it actually validated their initial design. So the tools I'll send on to you for this is one called Identifying Themes, and that's themes of research. And the other one is the reframing tool that we use is called the How Might We statement. And you'll get a method card for that. You'll also get the How Might We card. And again, these are just things that you can test and try out in your team and see if they work and see if people enjoy it, if it does anything for you. But we'll give you the documentation and the tool of how to use the documentation. And finally, the last example is this test and learn thing. And this is actually my favorite part, because as an engineer, having spent time in manufacturing, as a manufacturing engineer, and also in R&D doing lab work, to me, a prototype was like the first version of the product, right? So it's super expensive. It's got all the bells and whistles, and it's ready to go. And it's either going to the customer for the first time for them to see if all the buttons work, or it's going on the production line for the first time to see how you can set up your manufacturing process and make many of them. This is called the design prototype that we're talking about, and it's really totally conceptual. And once you see how simple this can be, the power of it is amazing, right? So many of you have already done this, you know how to do this, but just kind of for those of you who don't, a prototype is like a model of your idea. It's got just the amount of features that you need built into it. And when I say built into it, it can be Legos or Play-Doh. I'll show you an example. It can be a storyboard. It can be something that you act out. And it's all about seeing if you can, when you put it in front of other people to get their response, if they can punch holes in it. Because if you're doing it for $10 worth of materials, that's going to save you tons of money in validating your hypothesis as you go forward. And so a prototype can be a simple mock-up, and we talked about UX a lot of times. This is these wireframes are the way that they mock things up and model things in the user experience world. You can have a storyboard, which talks again about the sort of holistic experience, the lived experience of the user. It doesn't focus on the screens, but it focuses on, say, the different scenes instead of screens of the user's use of your product or service or whatever it is. You can build a physical prototype, and I'll show you an example of that in just a second. And then you can also act out. You can have a scene and sort of I've seen this done a lot where you model the experience of using a website by just having one person being the website, responding to the other person, asking questions. It's kind of funny, but it really, really works, super powerful. So you do this in order to make a physical representation of your idea, your hypothesis, and you use it as a way of communicating your idea to other people. You really want them to react to it. That's what it's all about. They can be as simple as this, a real world prototype that we did with a client. It can be like this. It can have, you know, pictures and show the scene of different storyboard scenes. And here's an example of somebody making a physical representation that shows this was an experience at a particular client that we did Bacardi over Christmas, and they were all wearing their funny Bacardi sweaters. Yeah, another example of a prototype. And this is at Marriott. This is how they prototyped. Is obviously a lot more higher fidelity of a prototype, but if you're going to model layouts of different rooms for different kinds of hotel chains, this is how they do it. They do it in a lab environment like this, as opposed to, and they bring customers in, they bring their franchisees in to look at these different models to get their reaction before they start to build things. They will actually do this in cardboard, and before they do it in cardboard, they'll do it as a sketch, and before as a sketch, they might do it as acting something out. So that's how that works. So the example I wanted to go through those examples, but Syngenta is a client we work for. We did a design sprint. Many of you might be familiar with this. It's a 5-day process if you follow the sort of Google Ventures methodology. We brought together a bunch of internal Syngenta people. They're a crop protection and seeds company in the agricultural world. And they were looking for how do they provide digital tools to farmers to help farmers be more successful. And we went through the whole process of the design sprint. I won't bore you with all the details, but you go through essentially design thinking you start with a little bit further down the line where you have an idea and you want to test that idea, but you do a good bit of the double diamond throughout the process. You build prototypes, and then at the final day on the Friday, you bring customers in and you show them the prototypes. Here's 2 happy smiling faces doing the testing, literally just sort of mock-ups like those PowerPoint mock-ups we did with SAP to show the farmer what the experience would be like for these prototype ideas that the team came up with. So there were 3 teams that tested 3 different prototypes, 3 different parts of the idea. And they, in a week, were able to validate or not invalidate certain hypotheses that they had come up with. And they worked side by side throughout that whole process with customers coming in at different points, the beginning, the middle, and at the end. So I got a lot of good feedback and a credible amount of value and understanding of their growers. And they, one quote is, "We were aiming over here, and it turns out we needed to aim over there." I mean, all of this in a week really saves the client a ton of money, helps them go faster, as I was saying. These are the tool. This is the tool I will send you. It's a simple tool, but powerful, as many of them are. It has places for 9 different scenes. It's got a little bit about the value proposition, the cost structure, and the revenue stream down at the bottom. It will come with one of these. It's actually this one. It's the empathy map. One of my favorites, super easy to use. Oh no, that's not the empathy map. That's the service scenario. I'll send the empathy map as well. And yeah, coming back to this, right? Design thinking, it's all about putting the tools and the mindset of designers into the hands of everybody. It's democratizing design. Don't be afraid of the word design. Don't even use it if you don't want to. I prefer many times talking about being human-centered or human-centered design. That's what it is. I hope this was helpful to everybody. We've got about 5 more minutes for questions, and I appreciate you listening to me. I love this quote. You can talk about design thinking, but the only way you can understand it is to actually do design thinking. So I encourage you to give it a try. There you go. Oh, we have one last poll. Julia, can we launch that one real quick? It's a simple poll.
Yes, we can. Here we go. So one last poll here, and then we will open back up for Q&A. All right. We are almost at 100% of attendees voted, and the answer is yes. All
Okay.
right.
Great,
We
great.
like it.
Well,
Look at that.
that puts a punctuation on my part of the presentation, and we can open it up to Q&A. Get over to my
Yes.
Q&A
So
slide.
I will, there you go. All right, we will call on, let's see, Mr. Jeremy says, on the topic of co-creating, can you speak to whether there is a best strategy or guide for selecting those customers who are going to help with the design process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Your reaction is to pick those customers that are the most friendly with you. And that's probably a good place to start, but I would also say to bring in customers that may be critical because or that you may think of as difficult because there's something there, right? So there are other really practical things like which ones are willing and available to come along. But I think my short answer would be getting some customers involved is better than not getting any customers involved, and getting them deeper into your design process than you would normally feel comfortable is probably the place to start, right? So as far up in the process as you possibly can, in particular in the research stage, even in defining what problem you're trying to solve stage at the beginning, before you go out and research that problem area. I think it's almost more when you get your customers involved than who you get which customers you get involved.
Yeah, that's great. Please keep your questions coming in. It looks like right now no other questions have come in, but I'm sure they will before I finish talking here. So I'll just pause for a second and let some questions come in. While they come in, I just want to remind everybody real quick that we have webinars scheduled throughout the end of the year, and we're already starting to schedule them come the new year as well. Our next one is about understanding the valuation of your company. Simply, the title is What is it worth, right? That is October 14th from 11 to 12. So we'll go back to the questions now and see if anything else has come in. Will this presentation become available afterwards? Yes. The answer is yes. I will post not only I won't only just share those, handouts that Mark is talking about right now, but this entire recording will be available live, or not live, it's a recording, so it will be available on our website by the end of the day. So let's see, and then the question has come in saying, can we have your contact information? Mark, I don't know if you have one final slide with your there you go, there you go. And another question has come in. Any suggestions on how to educate or there we go. Another question about, how to educate or convince leadership that's slower, that you have to go slower to go faster, and that's the focus to solve the right problem. Any other suggestions? I know you touched on that earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just it's that idea of testing and learning that applies to your products. It also applies to the process, right? So I think it really is just picking one simple thing. I think the power is bringing customers in front of leadership. That I've seen work over and over again, where the whole organization basically thinks they know their customers, in particular people in senior levels of the organization. But every customer contact almost always brings new insights. So bringing customers into the conversation is a really fast and easy way to start that process. That whole thing about like going slower to go faster, that's going to just take time to build into the organization. But that would be my first answer.
Awesome, thank you. Well, we have just less than a minute now. I just want to officially say thank you so much, Mark, for taking the time and coming out here and hosting this really awesome webinar. We all learned so much, and I just want to thank you very much. Everyone on the line, thank you for attending. Stay tuned for follow-up email with the handouts and the recording. Thank you again.
Thanks, Julie.
Bye,
Thanks,
Mark.
everybody, for coming. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.